So this morning's message is entitled, Be Angry, Sin Not. Be angry, sin not. And this is helpful because as we talk about the emotion of anger, we want to recognize that anger is an appropriate emotion. That there are places, times, and spaces that we are called to be angry, and yet we are told and instructed in Scripture yet not to sin. Now, how do we know that anger is an appropriate emotion? We know that because we are told in Scripture to live in imitation of God in Christ. We are to walk in His footsteps, to use that analogy from our sermon series title, and we are told to imitate Him. And the question is, does God ever get angry? You know, it's a good question to ask because sometimes you see on billboards, I remember when I would drive around Florida, I see this billboard, it say, God is not angry. So it's an interesting question. Is God angry? Now, we have testimony in Scripture that, yes, God is angry. Psalm 7 says that God is a righteous judge and a God who feels indignation, a God who feels anger every single day. We see in the book of Romans that the wrath of God is being poured out against the unrighteousness of mankind. So we know that God is angry, and if we are to live in imitation of God, then anger is an appropriate spectrum of emotion to live out of, but we want to make sure we're doing it in a righteous way. Because as we'll see, anger is also one of the most destructive of human emotions. So as we go through this together, we want to begin by asking the question, what is anger? How do we define that? And then recognizing there is a sinful way to be angry. There is be angry but sin not, but there's also a righteous anger to live out of. So what does that look like? What does righteous anger look like as we seek to follow Christ? So let's begin by asking the question, what is anger? If we're going to be angry but sin not, then we have to start by asking the question, well, what is it? And if we're going to ask the question, what is anger? What is really anything? A good place to start, it's not the ultimate answer, but a good place to start is in a dictionary. And so if you turn to Webster's dictionary and ask what is the entry for anger, it says this, that anger is a strong feeling of displeasure or annoyance, and often of active opposition to an insult, injury, or injustice. So we see here that anger is a feeling, but a strong feeling, and often involves a response. That anger causes us to do something, as we see here, it's an active opposition. And in opposition, we see injury, insult, and injustice. This is a good place to start, but we want to dig deeper and say, what else can we see biblically and through church history to understand the emotion of anger? And one helpful place for us to begin to think through is something that St. Augustine said in his work, The City of God. And he says that the root of the passions, so the root or the foundation of the passions or the emotions is love. That what the other emotions and passions are flowing out of at the root is love. And if this is true, or if there's any truth to this, this means that anger and love are connected and related. But I'm not so sure that we normally conceive of anger as having a connection to love. But want to suggest this morning that it does. That anger and love are related and connected. Another further definition that helps us kind of put language to this is a definition of anger that's given by Pastor Tim Keller, a pastor in New York City of Redeemer Presbyterian Church, a wonderful preacher, wonderful writer. So if you're sitting, bored in the middle of the day and you don't know what to do and you're on YouTube, type in Tim Keller sermons, okay? It's a good use of your time. And he says, in his definition, or a working definition of anger, is he describes anger as love in motion. Now that's interesting. Anger is love in motion. To protect, he says, to protect the thing that we really care about. Anger is love in motion. If this is true, and I want to suggest this is something to really consider, that means that when we are angry, that anger is an indicator to that which in our life we have attached our loves. Anger is an indicator to the things in our lives that we have attached our loves. Now, part of the problem with man is ever since man took that fruit from the tree, from the temptation of the serpent, our loves have become disordered. And rather than loving God and loving Him first and foremost, we love other things. Now, if we're going to love something else other than God first and foremost, what's the number one candidate to be the place that we love? Ourselves. Ourselves. And one of our primary things that we love is us. And so this is why it makes a lot of sense that even Webster is going to recognize in the definition of anger that it's a strong opposition to insult, to injury, those things that affect us. That's why when we're driving down the road, on the interstate, and somebody cuts you off, not everybody in here is going to respond the same way, but I imagine you probably get angry. Something in you gets angry because that's an insult to you. You've been insulted. And depending on the type and level of your anger, you can start doing all sorts of things to set things right and make it all just again. That's called road rage. But notice this. When you're driving down the road and you look 50 yards ahead and there's a car up to the left and that person gets cut off, do you not have a very different response? It's the same action. When I'm in the road and I see someone 50 yards ahead to my left get cut off, I don't get angry, I get curious. What's going to happen? Is he going to get mad? I almost want to speed up just to watch, What's going to happen here? Is this person going to get upset? But the thing to notice is I am not angry at that moment, really. But boy, but the person who got cut off, I bet you he is, because if it was me, I probably would be, because the object of my love is myself. And so I've been insulted. I will get angry to rise up in defense of myself. This is also true not just of ourselves, but others we love and care for. If you're reading in the newspaper or online or something of some kind of news report indicating that somebody had been injured or assaulted in something in another state or in another country, you might read that and maybe you have some concern, but I don't think you really would get angry, depending on the nature of it, but most likely not. But I tell you what, if someone calls you on the phone, says, "This is Officer Smith, I want you to know that a member of your family has been attacked," you have a very different response. You will get angry because you love your family in a very different way than you don't have a love that's connected to a nameless person from a nameless place that you don't know. So you will rise up in opposition. Anger is love in motion. So I will rise up to defend that which I love, in this case, my family. So this is a helpful place as we consider the nature of anger, which is love in motion, connected to protection of that which we really care about, which can have a very righteous expression, but can also have a sinful expression. So let's talk about this, and let's talk first, because the Apostle Paul spends most of his time talking about the sinful expression of unrighteous, sinful anger. What does unrighteous, sinful anger look like? How can we see it, recognize it? Because if we're going to put on the new self, we have to put off this sinful anger. Now, in the text, Paul, in verses 26 and 27, gives us 3 phrases where he is describing this sinful anger. So first off, he describes it as being sinful. First, be angry, but do not sin. So there's a sinful expression of anger. And we're going to say that that sinful expression of anger is destructive. So the first thing about anger to know is it's destructive, sinfully. The second thing, he says, do not let the sin go down on your anger. So we'll note that anger is not only destructive, but it's also addictive. Anger is addictive. And then thirdly, do not let the opportunity for the devil, that when we live in an unrighteous anger, it becomes demonic, meaning that the devil gets in it. So it's destructive, it's addictive, and demonic. So the first is, he says here, be angry but do not sin. And here we want to talk about the destructive nature of sin and the destructive nature of sinful anger. And that we want to see first that affects ourselves. It's destructive to us, even physically. It's also destructive to relationships and can even be destructive to whole societies. So we see it's destructive personally, even physically. The Proverbs, chapter 14, says, "A tranquil heart is life to the body, but passion," this disordered passion, which is obviously translated different ways, "is rottenness to the bones." There is an anger that actually begins to eat at us, emotionally and physically. So physically, things like heart health. When you lose your temper, for the next 2 hours, you are 2 times as likely to have a cardiac event. It's dangerous to your heart health. And we're talking here not just losing our temper, but just having a place where we're just angry people, and anger becomes a part of us. It ups your stroke risk. It weakens your immune system. It increases your anxiety. It's linked to depression, and even affects lung health. Lung capacity is decreased for those who live in and out of a place of anger. It also is destructive to relationships. Now, that's pretty clear. I don't think you have to really explain that one. You ever gotten mad at somebody? There you go. But to show the extent to which anger can be destructive of relationship, consider this. You don't necessarily need to blow up and display your anger to actually have that anger be disruptive to relationship. It's like when someone comes to you and says, "Did you know that Billy is mad at you?" Doesn't that affect you? He doesn't have to blow up at you. You just have to hear about it to experience the effects on relationship of anger. Dallas Willard, in his book, The Divine Conspiracy, puts it this way. He says, "When I discover your anger at me, quite apart from acting it out, you don't have to blow up at me. I'm already wounded, which may evoke my anger in response. I can't believe Billy's mad at me. I'm mad at him now." It also raises the stress level of those around us. In other words, it doesn't just affect me and Billy, it affects me and Billy and those around us when they know there's tension and there's anger between us. And we don't even necessarily need to yell. It shows the destructive nature of anger. Think about the first place in Scripture where you see relationship being destroyed through the use of anger. You don't have to look further than Genesis chapter 4. Cain and Abel. You know what the number one cause of murder is? Anger. Again, it's common sense, but it's worth saying. Now, anger is not only destructive to ourselves, destructive to relationship, but it can be destructive of entire societies. Entire societies can be taken down through anger, and we have no idea about that in our world today. No idea about that. But the book of Ecclesiastes says there's nothing new under the sun. The first century philosopher who was a contemporary of the Apostle Paul, Seneca, talked about the nature of anger and this vast destructive ability of it. And he says, if you choose to view the results of anger and the harm of it, no plague has cost the human race more dear. Behold the most glorious cities whose foundations can scarcely be traced. Anger can cast them down. Anger can undo not just individual lives. Anger can destroy not just relationships. Anger can take down cultures. Anger can take down societies. It's destructive. Anger is also addictive. It says here, do not let the sun go down on your anger. Now, normally when I hear this verse, or this section of this verse, I hear it applied to marriage counseling, or maybe even a marriage homily, and they'll say something like, if you get angry with your spouse and you're having a fight or an argument, make sure that you work it out before you go to bed, because the scriptures say, don't let the sun go down on your anger, right? You know what I'm talking about, in that kind of a context. Now, that is definitely appropriate. It is an appropriate thing to apply this verse to a marriage, but notice that the context in Ephesians 4 is not marriage. Now, you can appropriately apply it to marriage. If he wanted to apply it and have it be specifically pointed towards marriage, all he needed to do was wait till chapter 5, because in Ephesians chapter 5, he talks a lot about marriage. the role of husbands, the role of wives. And if he wanted to say, look, really what I'm talking about is your marriage, he could have just cut and paste, here and put it over there. But what the Apostle Paul is talking here about is not simply about the tension that can be introduced into a marriage relationship. He is saying all of your anger, all of it, pointed towards any and everything. Don't let the sun go down on that. It's not limited to your spouse. There was a theory of how to deal with anger really prevalent in the 20th century. It was called the catharsis view of anger. This view of anger said that if you have an angry emotion, the best thing to do is to work it out. And you work it out typically by venting your anger. So you might see a billboard saying, hit the pillow, hit the wall, don't hit your kids. This is something called the catharsis view of anger. You work anger out by venting it. Now, this has its roots back into the psychology of Sigmund Freud. Now, Sigmund Freud, who was doing his work during the Industrial Revolution, was very interested in machines. And during the Industrial Revolution, machines were largely run by steam. And so the steam would provide the pressure to run the engine, but eventually that pressure would build up, and so you had to vent or release the pressure by allowing the steam to release. And Freud said human beings are like that anger builds up, and so the best way to release anger is to vent it. This is wrong. Okay, if you believe that, this is wrong. And this isn't just simply in hitting the pillow or hitting the wall. We have people who live out of a venting kind of mentality even when it comes to racism and the use of our words. There was an article in the New York Times Magazine by Andrew Sullivan that said if we're going to work out our racism, let's use our words rather than our fists. We'll vent it. He says this, some expressions of prejudice serve a useful purpose. It lets off steam. It allows natural tensions to express themselves. This is Freudian. Just vent it. It can siphon off conflict. So that way it won't escalate. You let the tension out with words rather than actions. Even the title, what's so bad about hate? Well, you're just letting off steam. The problem is, first off, that's messed up. The problem is, it doesn't work. It does not work. It actually has the opposite effect. When you act out your anger, you are actually feeding your anger. You are not siphoning it out. One person who's shown this through study after study, decade after decade, is a man named Brad Bushman. He's a professor at Iowa State, and he's done study after study, not only with watching the psychology and the behaviors of people, but also through physiological research of the brain, to say that when we act in this way, we are feeding it rather than diminishing it. He says that people feel good after venting anger. Isn't that true? Hey, how did you feel after you hit that punching bag? I feel great. Well, how do you feel after taking a substance that's addictive? It's like telling a person, hey, how do you feel after you take a hit of that? I feel great. Oh, well, good. We'll keep doing that. Well, I feel good. Here's the problem. The good feeling reinforces the aggressive behavior. Venting anger is like using gasoline to put out a fire. He goes on. It only feeds the flame by keeping aggressive thoughts active in the memory and by keeping angry feelings alive. If you want someone to get more and more angry, express more and more anger. This is why the scriptures, in their wisdom, say, don't let the sun go down on your anger. The Proverbs say this, a man of great wrath will pay the penalty. For if you deliver him, you will have to do it again. A person who is angry as a way of being will act that anger out and act that anger out and act that anger out. Because when you act out that anger, it has a dopamine-releasing pleasure effect, just like other substances which become addictive. Which means that we should not be indulging this. You know who knows this? this reality, by the way, who knows this about you and is using this to manipulate you. Social media and news media. Social media and news media know this about the human condition, and they use it to manipulate you. A USA Today article says this: optimized by social media algorithms and strategic programming, we have stumbled on anger and we have stumbled on indignation as the cocktail of choice to grab attention and force engagement. For political reporting, the principle is if it outrages, it leads. I hope your sign says, I see this. This is how they keep you hooked in. And they keep you hooked in because the more you click on it, what do they make? And the more you are engaged, what do they make? Money. He goes on. Creators on the right and the left saw that to build a following, it pays to operate at the edges, to show extreme content. Frame all news and opinion as an existential fight against evil on both the left and the right, triggering an adrenal fight or flight reaction, which is accompanied by a flood of dopamine. This becomes addictive. And that you are continually plugged into what would be called the outrage industrial complex. If you can be kept in them, they're plugged in through the mechanism of an addictive reaction of anger, then they can make money off of you. You know, the scriptures say this, and we're going to look at this in further detail here in a second. Be watchful and be sober-minded. Be watchful and sober-minded. Why? This is 1 Peter. Your adversary, the devil, is prowling around. And if he can keep you angered and full of indignation and to plug you in, let's be sober-minded and watchful. Maybe we need to not be so plugged in to the outrage industrial complex of our social media and news medias. I didn't mean for anyone to clap, but before you, what I'm not saying is there is a virtue to ignorance. I'm not saying ignorance is a virtue, but know what's going on. Know what's going on. And that's what he says. Give no opportunity to the devil. That the devil gets in this. Does the devil want you to work out your anger? No, the devil wants you to indulge it. The devil wants you to live in it. And what does it look like? We see in verse 31 of Ephesians 4. It looks like bitterness and wrath and anger and clamorous people and slanderous people and malicious people. When Christians or the world begin to exhibit these character traits, it shows the devil's got his roots all down into our hearts. And so we are to put those away. Pastor in the United Kingdom, Martin Lloyd-Jones, he's long gone now, but he said this: sinful anger, the moment it has taken over, the devil enters in. Sinful anger. We're talking about sinful anger. He will keep it going, and he will insinuate thoughts and ideas and implant them. He wants to keep you angry. Never open the door to the devil. Be sober-minded. Be watchful. And then he says, when you lose your temper, you open it wide, it could not be wider. And so Martin Lloyd-Jones will help us to bring it from that societal anger. Let's talk this still down into the individual expression of anger, especially as it erupts in the explosion of losing our temper. Ecclesiastes says, do not be quickly provoked in your spirit, for anger resides in the lap of fools. And when you lose your temper, which of course no one in here has ever done, you become an idiot. What I mean by that, and you know it, because as soon as you come to yourself, even that language, I've come to myself, you think, it was stupid of me. Don't you? You always have to go back and apologize and go, oh, that was stupid of me. I shouldn't have said that. We even use language like this: it wasn't me. Well, who was it then? Because when we lose our anger, we lose our minds. And the devil gets in there. And, C.S. Lewis puts this, anger is the anesthetic of the mind. It shuts it down. It's like we have no more use of our reason. We just start spouting out, and remember, what is anger? Anger is destructive, and so we're going to destroy and annihilate whoever we're talking with. So if you lose your temper on someone with your words, you're trying to annihilate that person with your words. You are trying to take them out. And if you lose your temper with someone physically, you're trying to end them. That's why you lose your temper. You're trying to end them. And so we need to be on guard because it's destructive, it's addictive, and it's demonic. So how then can we be angry but not sin? How can we be angry? How can we have righteous anger? Because we said God is angry, but God is not sinful. So how do we have righteous anger? As the scripture says, be angry. Be angry. The early church father, John Chrysostom, says this, he who is not angry when he has cause to be sins. We have reason to be angry. But we need to be angry at and the ways that God is angry. It's interesting that even in Dante's Inferno, in the level of hell where you have those that are angry, they reside in the river Styx. There are two types of people that are in the river Styx in the level of hell of anger. One is the angry, the other is the slothful. The slothful, the angry are in the river Styx up to chest deep, and all they do is hit each other all the time. They're just expressing their anger. They're just living into the fullness of what their life was characterized by. But the slothful are those that are submerged in the river Styx. There are times where we need to be angry. If we aren't being angry, I wonder sometimes there's not something wrong with our hearts. We need to be angry. Be angry, but sin not. So how do we do that? This is hard. Two things, there's so many things we could say. We're going to mention two. If we're going to have righteous anger, then we must be, one, slow to anger, slow to be angry. And the second is to be surgical in the focus of our anger. We must be slow to become angry and surgical in the focus of our anger. So the first one is slow to anger. James talks about this. Know this, my beloved brothers, let every person be quick to hear, slow to speak, slow to anger. Because the anger of man, which all we've talked about in this sinful anger, the anger of man does not produce the righteousness of God. Be slow to anger. And why should we be slow to anger? Who else is slow to anger? God himself. When God reveals his name to Moses on the mountain in Exodus 34, he reveals his name, the Lord who is merciful, compassionate, slow to anger, and abounding in steadfast love. The book of Proverbs says, whoever is slow to anger has great understanding. And by the way, how slow is God to anger? How slow? Slow. A lot slower than we want to be. A lot slower than we want to be. We need to be like him. Slow to anger. Whoever has a hasty temper exalts folly. Proverbs 19, those with good sense are slow to anger, and it is their glory to overlook an offense. If we're going to be slow to anger, that means we're not flying off the handle. Is that fair? We're not going to fly off the handle. And if we're not going to fly off the handle with our tempers and other kinds of expression of rash anger, then we have to be able to do this. Is this hard? To overlook an offense? Particularly when the object of your love is yourself above God. It's very hard. But love covers over a multitude of sins. Is there glory to overlook an offense? Be slow to anger. The second thing is to be surgical in our anger. What do we mean by surgical in our anger? It means that we are focused specifically like God is on the source of sin. Now, God is angry. We said that. He's angry every day. What is God angry at? Starts with an S. Sin. God is angry at sin because sin is destroying his good design. Sin is destructive of God's goodness. And so God is angry at sin. And the same for us as we as we're slow to anger, we want to be surgical with our anger to sin. This is just the way it works out in regular relationship. As an example, maybe as a parent, I have to think about this, and I'm not the best at this, so a little confession here with you, towards our children. Towards our children. If a child is misbehaving, depending on what they're doing, they can make you pretty mad. Parents, grandparents, no? Work with me here. Can make us angry. Yes. And sometimes if we're acting out of an unrighteous, sinful anger, and depending how quickly that rises up, I can start expressing this really destructive anger towards my kids, towards all of our kids. We can be destructive in our anger. We can say some things where we're kind of coming at them, and part of that stems because what is love? What is anger is love in motion. So if I love myself and you've done something against me, I'm going to defend myself against even my own kids. So surgical anger means when I'm going to be a lot slower. Boy, I need to hear this. A lot slower to become angry because it's my glory to overlook an offense. Because love covers over a multitude of sins. So I'm going to get angry, but I'm going to be slower, but I'm going to be surgical. What I'm going to hopefully do at my best day is recognize what is the issue here. What is at issue, and how do I focus my anger at the issue? So if one of my kids is being insulting towards another one of the kids, then if I'm on my good days, I'm not just going to blow up at that person, my son or daughter, and just blow up at them. I'm going to be surgical. What is that issue? I'm going to be slow. I need to address the issue, the sin issue, so that he and I together or she and I together can address that issue together. The issue is the sin. What one person described this is really helpful to me, the constructive displeasure of mercy. I'm going to say, I didn't put that in the constructive displeasure of mercy. That when God is angry, his anger is constructive. It displays his displeasure, but it's merciful. I'm going to give two examples and we'll close. These are quick. The first example of the constructive displeasure of mercy, where God is surgical and he's slow, is the very first time God gets angry in the Bible. Do you know the very first time God is described as being angry in the Bible, where that is? I'll give you a hint. It's not in the book of Genesis. Now, I'm not saying God never gets angry in Genesis or doesn't have reason to be angry. It just doesn't say in the text, God was angry. The first time in the text that says God was angry is in the book of Exodus, and it's with Pharaoh, Moses. The very first time that God is ever angry, the very first person he's angry with is his servant Moses. Where does judgment begin in the scriptures? Judgment begins in the household of God. You know, when Jesus displays his anger, which Jesus gets mad, it's interesting to consider how and where Jesus gets angry. The most famous place of his displeasure, his anger, is in the temple. When Jesus comes into Jerusalem and he wanted to get mad, he could have gone lots of places. He could have gone into the Roman head, the Roman garrison, and displayed his anger there. He could have gone into the state house here and there. Where does he go? He goes into the place of worship. So where does God get angry first with Moses? And I want to show you, what does God do in his anger, and how does this teach us? So this is Exodus chapters 3 and 4. God reveals himself to Moses in the burning bush. He says, "You're my guy. I'm sending you back. You're going to go to Pharaoh, and you're going to tell him to let my people go." Does Moses jump at that? Hey, great idea. I've been waiting for this my whole life. He says, "No, I don't want to do that." He said, "First off, who am I even going to say sent me? They won't even listen to me. Who are you? Who should I say sent me?" And he says, he tells them his name. "My name is Yahweh. I am that I am." You'll tell them the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob has sent you, so now go. So now you know my name, now go. He says, "Well, no, wait, hold on. I can't go. I mean, the people aren't even going to believe me. How will they believe me? Yeah, maybe I know your name, but come on." And he says, "Well, what do you got in your hand?" "I have a staff." "Well, throw it on the ground." Becomes a snake. He picks it up, pick it up, becomes a staff again. He says, "That's not enough. Put your hand in your cloak. Pull it out. Your hand is leprous. Put it back. Bring it out again. Your hand is clean." Okay, we good now? Is he good now? No. This is now 1, 2, 3. The third time Moses says no. Here's what he says. "Pardon your servant, Lord." At least he's polite. "I've never been eloquent, neither in the past nor since you have spoken to your servant." I haven't become eloquent in the last 30 minutes. "I'm slow of speech and tongue. I don't want to go." This is the third time. Is God still merciful? Is God slow to anger? Yeah. The Lord says to him, look, who made you? Come on. Who gave human beings their mouths? Who makes them deaf or mute? Who gives them sight or makes them blind? Is it not me? Now go. This is now the third time. Go. Just go. I will help you speak. I'll teach you what to say. Does Moses say, good? I'm good now? No. Fourth time. This is long. This is God, the maker of heaven and earth. Moses is now saying no 4 times. Pardon me, Lord. Please send someone else. God gets mad. This is the very first time God gets mad. Then the Lord's anger burned against Moses. Now, in God's anger, what does he do? Constructive displeasure of mercy. Does he zap him out of existence? 4 times. Now, we're playing a different mode of baseball. 4 strikes, you're out, you're dead. I guess I'll go to someplace else. What does he do? Sometimes we live with God this way, like he can't wait to zap us, you know. That's not what he does. What does God do in the display of his anger? He gives him his brother. What about your brother Aaron the Levite? He can speak well. He will speak to the people for you. In the anger of God, he actually meets the need. Is this not merciful? Is this not constructive? Do you think God was pleased with Moses 4 times? No, he's displeased. But he's constructive and he's merciful. And he's surgical. He meets the need that Moses has. One other example and we'll close. This example is you and this example is me. Is God angry? What's God angry at? Sin. And who does that implicate? You and me. Now, we said, as Pastor Tim Keller reminded us, that anger is love in motion. And that the anger of God is constructive displeasure of mercy. And so the anger of God towards sin, do you see the surgical aspect of God's anger? Because what does he do in his anger? He could just obliterate every single person. He has the right to do that. But he is a slow to anger, merciful, compassionate, abounding in steadfast love God. And so what in his anger does he do? He sends his champion to defend. Now think about that. He sends his champion to defend that which he loves. And who does he love? You. He loves you. So instead of wiping you out, instead of losing it, he sends Jesus. And in the constructive displeasure of mercy, he dies on a cross in your place. He's pierced for your transgression. He bears the full wrath of God so you will never have to. And may we put on the new self to be like Christ, to put away sinful anger, and to put on what it means to be slow to anger and surgical in our anger. Let's pray. Gracious Heavenly Father, we thank you that you, in your anger, and we thank you that you are a righteous judge who is angry. We thank you that you are a God of anger because that displays your goodness. That in your love, you have sent your champion to defend that which you really care about. That is humanity and your creation. Lord, may we, in casting off our old self, put away the destructive nature of anger, put away the addictive nature of anger, put away the demonic nature of anger. And may we put on righteous anger, to be angry at what angers you with what reflects your heart. May we be slow to anger, quick to overlook an offense, quick to let love cover over multitudes of sins. And may we be surgical in our anger. May we be constructive in our displeasure to show mercy. And we thank you. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.